Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, dear participants. Riba adha'afa mudha'afa. Wattaqullaha la'allakum tuflihun. Wattaqun nar allati u'iddat lil kafirin. Wa atiullaha wa rasula la'allakum turhamun. Wasari'u ila maghfiratin min rabbikum. Wa jannatin arduha as-samawati wal ard. U'iddat lil muttaqin. الذين ينفقون في السراء والضراء والكاظمين الغيظ والعافين عن الناس والله يحب المحسنين. Believers, if in future also you want God's help, do not consume this interest, doubling it many times over, and keep fearing God that you may prosper. And protect yourselves against the fire that has been prepared for the disbelievers, and remain obedient to God and His Messenger that you earn mercy. And run to advance to the forgiveness of your Lord and to paradise, which is as vast as the heavens and the earth, prepared for the righteous who spend in all circumstances, whether they are in ease or in hardship, and even if they encounter any excesses from those upon whom they spend. They curb their anger and forgive people. These are people who are thorough in their deeds, and God befriends those people who are thorough in their deeds. والذين إذا فعلوا فاحشة أو ظلموا أنفسهم ذكروا الله فاستغفروا لذنوبهم ومن يغفر الذنوب إلا الله ولم يصروا على ما فعلوا وهم يعلمون أولئك جزاؤهم مغفرة من ربهم وجنات تجري من تحتها الأنهار خالدين فيها ونعم أجر العاملين. And such are they that if they commit a lewd act or do something evil to themselves, remember God and seek forgiveness for their sins, but God can forgive sins, and who do not deliberately persist in what they have done. It is these who shall be rewarded with forgiveness from their Lord and with orchards beneath which streams will flow. They shall dwell there forever. And what a grand reward this is for those who do righteous deeds. So this passage starts off, dear viewers, with a very important admonition and warning from the Quran, and that is not to consume interest. And the way it is mentioned here is "La ta'kulu riba adha'afa mudha'afa," which means that you are charging a high rate of interest. And this is something of an immoral contract, immoral type of agreement that has been made between the lender and the person who has borrowed money. The Quran has proscribed it, and not only the Quran, all ancient scriptures, they bear witness to this, that earning money on interest is something which is against morality, against good conduct. And the reason for that, of course, is that when you give a loan, or when someone borrows money from yourself, the purpose is that you are going to help that person. So basically, lending in Islam is an institution, or is an instrument to help other people and not to gain anything out of that lending. And when you are lending someone, then basically that is a help that you are giving. And other than that, if you are earning, then this is something, of course, in which that person who has borrowed money from you will have to recreate that money and also pay over and above what you have given him as interest. So this is what makes that contract unjust and oppressive contract. Here, something that might be of cause of misconception are the words adha'afa mudha'afa, which means doubling and tripling it manifold. Some people think that this is referring to usury or high interest rates, and therefore they think that what the Quran has forbidden is just high interest rate and not a normal interest rate. Well, this is again a confusion and a misconception, because in the Arabic language, at times the attributes which occur, they are not meant to qualify a noun the way we think they are meant to qualify. They in fact point out to the nature of the crime, or the nature of the sin, which becomes even more rampant, or which becomes even more severe in the presence of the qualifying clause. For example, when it is said that you're telling lies, and that too in the mosque. So it doesn't mean that telling lies outside the mosque is something which is legal or allowed. It only adds to the situation that you are not only lying, but you are lying at a sacred place. Similarly, when it is said, do not charge interest by charging it manifold, it doesn't mean that you can charge it in a normal way. It only points to the harshness and the severity. Just as I said, when you say that you're lying in the mosque, it doesn't mean that you can lie out of the mosque and you can go out and do so. So once again, I'd like to clarify this, that in the Quran, we have encountered this verse of interest 3 or 4 times, and we will encounter it when we study the Quran. And each time you will see that whenever you read this verse, every time that is mentioned is the charging of interest, which is something forbidden. As far as paying interest is concerned, this is something which the Quran has not proscribed ever. And paying interest in itself is an oppression which a person suffers. So this is a thing that we have to keep in mind. And the Quran says, "Wattaqullaha la'allakum tuflihun," that you have to fear God so that you may prosper. The word ittaqullah is a very common word, is a very common expression. I've explained this earlier as well, and in our previous sessions also, that it does not mean that God is someone who is horrific and someone who is going to charge you or take you to task as soon as you do something wrong. It only means that you have to fear to lose his love. So fearing God doesn't mean that you fear him because anything per se, but because of the fact that you will lose his love and he will make him angry. And the thing which makes God angry is something which is in our own interest. So God's anger is not for his own self, it is for the betterment of his creatures. So ittaqullah must be very, very carefully and properly understood, and especially when we are explaining this to our younger generation, the fear of God has to be understood in its proper perspective. Otherwise, God's introduction suffers. So basically, we have to tell our younger generation and also educate ourselves that this fear is basically fearing the loss of his love. God is love and mercy personified. He is an embodiment of love and mercy. He would never be unjust and oppressive. He would never take revenge or avenge people if they behave the way they should. It is only a byproduct of his justice that at times he has to punish people. And this justice is also something which qualifies his love. وَاتَّقُوا النَّارَ الَّتِي أُعِدَّتْ لِلْكَافِرِينَ, and that said that protect yourselves against the fire that has been prepared for the disbelievers. وَأَطِيعُوا اللَّهَ وَالرَّسُولَ لَعَلَّكُمْ تُرْحَمُونَ, and remain obedient to God and his messenger that you may earn mercy. So again, obedience to God and obedience to his messenger is something which is a very important precept of the Quran. It's a concept that is repeated time and again, that obedience to God and his prophet is actually it actually signifies that you acknowledge the authority of God. He is the supreme being, he's our creator, he's the sovereign, and he is to be worshipped. And this worship, when it is used in this sense, it doesn't just encompass worship rituals, it also encompasses showing obedience to his directives. And of course, the directives are ones which have been revealed through his prophet. And then it is said that if you would obey God and his prophet, then you will earn his mercy. This is something that is a reward of that obedience. وَسَارِعُوا إِلَى مَغْفِرَةٍ مِّن رَبِّكُمْ وَجَنَّةٍ عَرْضُهَا السَّمَاوَاتُ وَالْأَرْضُ أُعِدَّتْ لِلْمُتَّقِينَ, and run to advance to the forgiveness of your Lord and to paradise, which is as vast as the heavens and earth, prepared for the righteous who spend in all circumstances. So this again is a very emphatic appeal, which the Quran every now and then does sound in our ears. So if you pick up the Quran from anywhere, you'll find this appeal or similar words repeating themselves, that come to your Lord, come to his forgiveness. He's waiting to forgive you. And the way it has been mentioned here is that his forgiveness is as vast as the heavens and the earth. His forgiveness is as vast as the heavens and the earth. And this paradise, which is, of course, as vast as the heavens and the earth, is something which has been prepared specially for the believers. So, the forgiveness of your Lord is something that you have to advance to. You have to leap to it, and the consequence of that forgiveness is that you will enter paradise, who is as vast as the heavens and the earth. Its expanse is something that is way beyond our imagination, and it is a place that we can maybe have some idea in our imagination, but once we do, inshallah, reach there, we'll have an entirely different spectacle to confront. And it says, "Uiddat lil muttaqeen," that it has been prepared for those who are pious, for those who actually are people who abide by the limits which are prescribed by God. So we've discussed this, that taqwa is a phenomena. It's a precept, it's a concept of the Quran, which means that you have to abide by the limits. We have to abide by the bounds prescribed by the Almighty. And then there are some other attributes of these muttaqeen which are described subsequently, and it is said, الذين ينفقون في السراء والضراء والكاظمين الغيظ والعافين عن الناس. So whether they are in hardship or in ease, and even if they encounter any excesses from those upon whom they spend, they curb their anger and forgive people. So what is mentioned here is that there are people who spend fis-sarra'i wal-dharra'i. They spend in ease and in hardship. So in other words, spending for the cause of God, to be a charitable person, is something that is required not only in circumstances in which a person is living comfortably, but also in stringent circumstances, or in circumstances in which a person might not be living in a comfortable way. The obligation is that whatever you can spare for the cause of God, in whichever form and whatever your own circumstances are, that should be done. And it should not become something of a habit that we wait for something to accumulate in large numbers and then we say, "Oh, only then we'll spend." So even if we have a small amount, we must not shy away from spending that amount in the Almighty, because every penny is something which is dear to God, and He is testing us whether we are spending in charity according to our own limitations or not. So even if we are limited in our spending, even then we should not withhold and restrain ourselves. And wal kazimin al ghaiz, and they are the ones who curb their anger and forgive people. So at times when we spend on people, especially, or we would like to spend on them and we have spent on them, we find that they might be asking for more, or maybe doing it in an annoying manner. The Quran says that if such is the case, that you have to curb your anger. You should not in any way be impolite to people who come and ask you for any money that you might have. If you're not available, if money is not available, or you think the person is not deserving, then it is best to restrain your anger and politely say no, and forgive them whatever they are asking for. Wallahu yuhibbul muhsineen, that it is such people who are thorough that the Almighty likes. And then it is said that they are such that if they commit a lewd act or do something evil to themselves, they remember God and seek forgiveness for their sins. And who but God can forgive their sins? And they do not deliberately persist in what they have done. So if they indulge in some indecency, if they stumble into some bad thing, or they are unfair to themselves, they immediately realize and come out of it. And as the Quran says, فَاسْتَغْفِرُوا لِذُنُوبِهِمْ, and they ask forgiveness for their sins, and who else but God can forgive them. And then another thing is that they don't insist on their follies. They don't insist, and they are not audacious on their mistakes and on their blemishes. Whatever they do, they immediately come out of it, and it's not that they become audacious on them. So the Quran says, these are the people, Ulaika jazaa'uhum maghfiratum min rabbihim, that it is they who shall be rewarded with forgiveness from their Lord and with orchards beneath which streams will flow. Again, this is a small description of paradise that you will find commonly being mentioned in the Quran. It does not mean that that this paradise will have underground rivers, as may be misconstrued. So if the Tahti al-Nahar means that orchards would be on a high level, on a high ground, so that they are safe for any calamity or any storm, and rivers would be flowing in the valley which is going to surround them. So this is the picture of paradise that is often portrayed and painted in the Quran. And it is said, Khalidina fiha, that they shall remain in it forever. This is for eternity. وَنِعْمَ أَجْرُ الْعَامِلِينَ, and this is a reward, and a grand reward for those who do righteous deeds. So we do pray and hope that all of us do land in this wonderful place called paradise one day. And with this, we come to an end to today's discussion, and now we move over to our next segment of Q&A.
Thank you, Dr. Shehzad, for a beautiful explanation of the verses. Rafia Khwaja, you may ask your question.
Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Shehzad. Dr. Shehzad, please correct me. What I have understood, that in the old times, when you loaned somebody money, in that time you gave a guinea to help someone and he would return a guinea to you. And now we don't deal in gold, but we do deal in cash. So if I have given somebody 1 lakh and he returns it to me after 10 years, should I not? I understand from scholars that inflation has to be taken into account, because the power of that 1 lakh after 10 years, I would not be able to buy even half of what I could when I loaned the money to him. So how would you explain the situation where the inflation is 20% now or 25%? So I would suffer a loss.
Yeah, I understand.
Jay.
So this is, of course, any borrower or any lender would be suffering, and of course not getting his own or her own money's worth. So the best way to do that is to link your loan to a stable commodity, for example, gold or any other commodity which is stable. And for if you were lending, if you were to be lending loan of let's say a lakh rupees today, you can link it up to the dollar or to the gold rate and say that, well, this is how gold is. I mean, it is worth this much gold. And the next time that you return this money to me, let's say after a year or two, then the same amount of gold would be the amount that you would return to me. So if today that, let's say 22 carats gold costs, what, let's say 1 lakh, which is not the case actually. You'll say that, well, I would require you return to me the value which is worth 22 carats of gold. So in this way, the lender will not suffer at all.
I'm
Thank
told
you,
that
Dr.
I can
Shehzad.
take.
Thank you, Rafia, for asking the question. Ibad Bhatti, you may ask your question now.
Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Shehzad.
Walaikum
I just
assalam.
wanted to ask कि जिस तरह अभी आपने बात की स्पेंडिंग की बात हुई थी, ज़कात की बात हो रही थी. So would it also be considered not zakat technically, but spending time with your family and your loved ones, उनकी जो responsibilities and duties हैं. So would you also consider that a way of maybe zakat or spending in the way of Allah?
I mean, you see, zakat is a term, and you cannot use it for things which are, for example, good deeds or righteous deeds. So when you spend time with your family, or you give them time, that is a charitable act. What you can say, it's a thing that is recommended. It's an act of kindness. This is what you should do. But zakat per se actually means to help a person who deserves to be helped, and so that is a different concept, and that is a different term actually.
Thank you, Dr. Shehzad. There's a question in the chat that could fear Allah be replaced with be conscious of Allah?
Well, you see, ittaqullah has been translated in a variety of ways, and to be honest, and I think that there's this limitation of the English language that we fail to come up with a single expression that actually translates that. And yes, I have heard and read about this translation that people, and one of the closest translations to me actually is to be God conscious. So just conscious, to be conscious might not be sufficient. So perhaps a better translation would be to be conscious of God, which actually means to abide by the limits prescribed by Him. So ittaqullah, when you translate it as fear of God, it brings all those misconceptions into mind that as if God is someone who has to be feared per se. So maybe God consciousness is a better translation.
Thank you. There's another question in the chat. They have written down a verse which is, and enjoin believing women to cast down their looks and guard their private parts and not reveal their adornment except that which is revealed of itself. The question is, this is a translation of Surah Nur. It says to guard private parts, as explained by Javed Ahmed Ghamidi Sahab, means private parts and their adjoining areas. The question is that Allah has already ordered to cover all the parts except hair, face, hand, and feet. Then why a separate verse to cover the embellishments on those parts? Won't the embellishments be naturally covered?
I mean, these are two different things that are being said in those verses. So one is yahfazna furujahunna, and the word is not to cover the private parts. I mean, the actual Arabic is yahfazna, which means to protect them. So protection is beyond coverage, and it means that you extend that coverage to parts which are adjacent. So that is what is implied by yahfazna furujahunna. And when it is said, وَلْيَضْرِبْنَ بِخُمُورِهِنَّ عَلَى جُيُوبِهِنَّ, or for example, it is said that La yubdina zinatahunna illa ma zahara minha, that you don't display your finery except that is already visible from parts which are naturally bared. So these are two separate things, and in that case what is being said is that what is naturally being exposed, or generally which is naturally exposed, is your hand. They are your hands, your feet, and your face. So if you have embellished your face, or you have done some makeup, or maybe embellish your hands and feet, then they don't need to be covered. That is what La yubdina zinatahunna, the words say. And you see, the exception is illa ma zahara minha, that you don't you don't embellish yourselves except on these parts. And if you do embellish yourselves on other than these three parts, then you have to cover that place. For example, if the head is just made up, I mean, you just comb your hair and you don't make it up, you don't embellish it, you don't adorn it, you don't need to cover it. It is only when the head has been made up or embellished or adorned that the covering of the head is required. Other than that, it's just an optional thing. So you see, these are two different scenarios.
Right. Thank you. Saira, you may ask your question now.
अच्छा, मेरा क्वेश्चन ये था कि घामदी साहब का जो मैंने पढ़ा है वो कहते हैं जो सोना मेरे इस्तेमाल में हो सो उस पे ज़कात नहीं है, whereas other schools of thought do not agree with that. So going by घामदी साहब's thing, अगर मेरे पास जैसे चूड़ियां हों फॉर एग्जाम्पल और मेरे पास एक हार हो और मैं अभी हार भी अल्लाह की राह में दे सकती हूँ मगर मेरा दिल नहीं मान रहा क्योंकि मैं उससे अपने लिए कुछ खरीदना चाहती हूँ, तो इज दिस अ फॉर्म ऑफ पेटिनेस फ्रॉम माय साइड? क्योंकि मैं अगर अब चूड़ियां देने को तैयार हूँ जिसपे मैंने अपने आप को राजी किया इस रमजान, बट हार मैं इसलिए रखना चाहती हूँ क्योंकि उससे मैं अपने लिए कुछ और बनाना चाहती हूँ.
This is perfectly fine. Why would it be called pettiness? Yani you have jewelry.
Because अगर मैं मतलब अपना तरफ से बहुत मतलब जो सही चीज है जो मुझे करनी चाहिए मेरे दिमाग में वो है कि मैं वो हार दूं, मगर मेरा दिल अभी सिर्फ चूड़ियों पे राजी है.
So that is okay. You see, there is a certain thing that is called an obligation, and there is
जी.
another thing that is called generosity, or maybe doing something that you would like to do more than what is required. So you see, you need to differentiate between an obligation and something which is beyond an obligation. Your obligation is that you are not required to give zakat on anything that you use for your personal, personal consumption, and this includes your children that you might, to whom you might transfer your jewelry. So only jewelry which is primarily kept for the purpose of investment, that is zakatable. So coming to your question, this was just a background. Coming to your own question, so you would like to give away your bangles, that is fine. But if you don't want to give away your necklace, that is absolutely fine as well, because in the first place, this is something that you have the right to own.
Okay, so this is not pettiness on my part.
Absolutely not. In fact, it's generosity. If you're giving away your bangles, that's an act of, I would say, it's a noble gesture that you're already doing. So it cannot be termed as pettiness in any way.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Shehzad. Salman Aziz, you may ask your question now.
Assalamu alaikum, sir.
Walaikum salam.
So my question was that the holy mosques in Saudi Arabia are called the Haram. So Masjid Nabi was described as haram since the beginning, or on some later stage, and some of the scholars do not agree with it.
Are you referring to the fact that the Prophet's mosque is not referred to as the haram?
Yes, some scholars say it's not, and some say it is.
Well, this is just an academic thing. All that we know from the Prophet's own narratives is that there are 3 places in the world for which you can journey and go there for special pilgrimage, and you'll earn much more reward, and those 3 places have been named by him. So one is the Baitul Haram, the Mosque of God in Mecca. The other is the Prophet's Mosque in Medina, and the third is Solomon's Mosque in Jerusalem. So all these 3 are basically mosques in their stature and in their outlook, and all 3 of them have been blessed by the Almighty, and the reward of praying there is much more than the reward of praying in any other mosque.
Thank you, Dr. Shehzad. Ammar Rasool, you may ask your question now.
अस्सलाम वालेकुम डॉक्टर साहब, मैंने पूछा था कि आपने अपनी कुछ टॉक्स के अंदर जो है वो ये जिक्र किया है कि द कॉवेनेंट हैज बीन पास्ड ऑन टू बनी इस्माइल एंड नाउ इट इज देयर रिस्पांसिबिलिटी टू फॉर द प्रोपगेशन ऑफ रिलीजन. सो एक सवाल मेरा ये था कि मी एज अ साउथ ईस्ट एशियन मुस्लिम, मैं तो बनी इस्माइल नहीं हो सकता बिकॉज ऑब्वियसली मेरी जो है वो लिनिएज हजरत इस्माइल वाली नहीं हो सकती. सो क्या ये मेरी जिम्मेदारी भी है या ये सिर्फ बनी इस्माइल की जिम्मेदारी है, और वो लोग अब कहाँ पे हैं? हाउ कैन वी नो? दूसरी चीज ये है कि एक मैंने टॉक सुनी गामदी साहब की जहाँ पे ये बात कही गई कि ये जो पूरा पेनिनसुला है अरेबियन, ये दीन के लिए खास कर दिया गया है और यहाँ पे कोई नॉन मुस्लिम रिजाइड नहीं कर सकते. दैट वाज द लॉ ऑफ अल्लाह. हाउ इज दैट रियलिस्टिकली पॉसिबल इन दिस डे एंड एज के एक इतना बड़ा ज्योग्राफिकल एरिया हो जहाँ पे कोई नॉन मुस्लिम्स नहीं हो सकते?
सो अगर आप उनकी बात को दोबारा सुनेंगे ना तो जरा वो थोड़ी सी मुख्तलिफ बात कह रहे हैं. वो सिर्फ ये कह रहे हैं कि अल्लाह ताला ने 2 सरजमीनों का इंतखाब किया था कि उनको तौहीद का मरकज बनाया जाए. پہلے جروسلم یا فلسطین کی سرزمین تھی اور اس کے بعد عرب کی سرزمین تھی، اور اس کو توحید کا مرکز بنانا پیش نظر تھا. اور اس کا یہ مطلب نہیں تھا کہ غیر مسلم وہاں نہیں رہ سکتے، اس کا مطلب ہے کہ وہ پرماننٹ طور پہ وہاں نہیں رہ سکتے، یعنی ان کی کوئی پرماننس نہیں ہو سکتی. چنانچہ اگر آج وہ وہاں پہ ان کے سفارت خانے ہوتے ہیں، ان کے امبیسڈرز وہاں آتے ہیں یا وہ ٹیمپرری طور پہ وہاں مل رہے ہوتے ہیں، تو ان کو وہاں ریزیڈنس پرووائڈ کی جائے گی. اس سے پرماننٹ ریزیڈنس نہیں پرووائڈ کی جائے گی، اس لیے کہ ایک جگہ اللہ تعالیٰ نے اس کا انتخاب کیا کہ یہاں صرف توحید ہی کے لوگ کے لمبردار لوگ رہیں. پوری دنیا میں تمام مسلمان ممالک میں ہر جگہ پہ ہر طرح کے مذاہب کے لوگ رہ سکتے ہیں، صرف ایک جگہ کو ماڈل بنا دیا گیا توحید کا. تو یہ اس کی حکمت ہے کہ تاکہ لوگوں کو پتہ لگے کہ توحید کا سینٹر کیا ہوتا ہے. اس سے پہلے یہی حیثیت جروسلم کو یا فلسطین کی سرزمین کو دی گئی تھی، جو ظاہر ہے وہ بھی نہیں پوری ہو سکی. تو یہ اس کی حکمت ہے، یعنی آپ سمجھ لیجئے کہ ایک ماڈل توحید کا سینٹر بنانا. جہاں تک آپ کی اپنی ذمہ داری کا تعلق ہے تو ظاہر ہے کہ ہم میں سے کوئی بھی بنی اسماعیل میں سے نہیں ہے. بنی اسماعیل عرب ہیں، اور اگر آپ ان کی زیادہ ٹریس کریں گے تو آپ کو اردن میں اور بعض مراکش کی جگہوں پہ آپ کو بنو ہاشم کے خاندان نظر آئیں گے. تو یہ پیور بنی اسماعیل ہیں. تو ذمہ داری تو اصل میں انہی کی ہے. اور اس وقت جو جزیرہ نما عرب میں جو خاندان ہیں، جو لوگ آباد ہیں، وہ بھی پیور بنی اسماعیل ہی ہیں. جہاں تک ساؤتھ ایسٹ ایشین مسلمز کا تعلق ہے، یا فار دیٹ میٹر دنیا میں جہاں جہاں وہ پھیلے ہوئے ہیں، تو وہ بنی اسماعیل تو نہیں ہے، لیکن وہ بنی اسماعیل کے حکم میں داخل ہو جائیں گے جیسے ہی وہ ان کا ساتھ دیتے ہیں. یہ ایسی ہے کہ جیسے اصل ذمہ داری تو ان کی ہے، لیکن جب آپ ان کے ساتھ مل جاتے ہیں تو آپ ان کی ذمہ داری میں ان کے ساتھ شریک ہو جاتے ہیں. تو یو بیکم پارٹ آف دیٹ ریسپانسبلٹی، بٹ پرائمرلی اٹ از دے ہو مسٹ فرسٹ گیٹ اپ، اسٹارٹ آف ود دیئر ڈیوٹی، اینڈ دین ہماری حیثیت اس کے بعد بنتی ہے کہ ہم ان کو جوائن کریں. ان کی ایبسنس میں ہم خود ہماری کوئی حیثیت نہیں ہے، یوں سمجھ لیں.
Thank you, Dr. Shehzad. Saima Khan, you may ask your question now.
السلام علیکم. تھینک یو. میرا کوشچن یہ جو سورہ فیل ہے اس کے اندر جو سینیریو بتایا گیا ہے وہ لائک وہ صحیح ہے یا وہ ایک کیا کہتے ہیں لائک آئی کی ناٹ ایکسپلین یو کہ جو ابرا نے جس طریقے سے خانہ کعبہ کے اوپر حملہ کیا تھا، ابابیل انہیں آ کے اس کو سیف گارڈ کیا تھا، تو اس کا کیا مطلب ہے؟ لائک اٹس لٹرلی مین دیٹ اور اٹس سم تھنگ ایلس؟
ایکچولی سورہ فیل کی جو انٹرپریٹیشن ہے وہ عام طور سے جو کی جاتی ہے، جیسے آپ نے بتایا کہ ابرہا نے حملہ کیا جو ایبسینیا کی جگہ تھی جہاں کا وہ حکمران تھا، اور he wanted to raise down the holy Kaaba and divert the pilgrimage to a big temple worship place that he had built in Yemen. تو یہ انہوں نے حملہ کیا، اور اس کا بہانہ انہوں نے یہ بنایا تھا کہ کسی عرب نے وہاں جا کے جو ان کی جو بڑی مسجد تھی صنع میں تھی، وہاں پہ انہوں نے he had relieved himself اور اس کو ناپاک کیا تھا. تو یہ ایک انہوں نے بہانہ بنا کے حملہ کیا، اور حملہ جب کیا تو عبد المطلب جو تھے انہوں نے دعا مانگی اللہ تعالیٰ سے. اور اللہ تعالیٰ کا رسول یہ ہے کہ دعا مانگنے کے بعد جب تک آپ خود کوئی ایفرٹ نہیں کرتے دفاع کرنے کی یا اپنے اوپر حملہ آوروں کو روکنے کی، اللہ تعالیٰ کی مدد ایسے نہیں آتی. تو عام کانسیپٹ یہ ہے کہ جب حملہ انہوں نے کیا تو عبد المطلب جو تھے وہ لے کے اپنی خاندان کو ساتھ جو ماؤنٹنس تھے وہاں چھپ گئے تھے، اور اس کے بعد جب انہوں نے حملہ کیا تو ابابیلوں نے آ کے پتھر مارے جو انہوں نے اٹھائے ہوئے تھے، اور اس کے نتیجے میں جو ابرہا کا جو لشکر تھا وہ تہس نہس ہو گیا. This is what commonly you might have read in the تفسیر of سورہ فیل. اس کی جو صحیح تفسیر ہے وہ یہ ہے کہ اصل میں جو اللہ تعالیٰ کا قانون ہے وہ یہ ہے کہ جیسے میں نے عرض کیا you have to take the initiative and then God's help arrives. So ہوا یہ ہے کہ عبد المطلب یقیناً اپنے خاندان اور اپنے قبیلوں کے ساتھ they had gone and taken refuge in the nearby mountains but they pelted stones from there. انہوں نے وہاں سے جو پتھر وغیرہ تھے وہ پھینکے تھے، اور ایک بہت زبردست طوفان آیا تھا. اس طوفان نے ان پتھروں کی سپیڈ اتنی بڑھا دی تھی، جب آپ پھینکتے ہیں اور تیزی کے ساتھ وہ ورلڈ پول میں آ جاتے ہیں، تو دے اسٹرک دوز ایلیفنٹس جو ابرہا کے تھے اینڈ دے ڈائیڈ ایز اے ریزلٹ. اور وہ جو پرندے آئے تھے وہ حملہ کرنے کے لیے نہیں آئے تھے بلکہ وہ لاشیں کھانے کے لیے آئے تھے. تو یہ پوری تفصیل ہے جو آپ کو مل جائے گی. آپ اگر استاذ امین حسن اصلاحی یا استاذ جاوید احمد غامدی کی تفسیر دیکھیں گے تو وہ لنگوسٹکلی بھی آپ کو بتائیں گے کہ جو ترمی کا جو فعل ہے اس کا مطلب ہے پھینکنا. تو جو جو پرندے ہوتے ہیں وہ تو اصل میں پھینک نہیں سکتے، وہ تو ڈراپ کر سکتے ہیں. تو ان کے لیے جو عربی میں فعل استعمال ہوا ہے وہ ٹو اسٹرائک، ٹو تھرو، تو وہ موضوع نہیں ہے پرندوں کے لیے. پرندوں کے لیے تو القا کا فعل آنا چاہیے، اس کا مطلب ہے ٹو ڈراپ سم تھنگ. تو لنگوسٹکلی بھی وہ بات صحیح نہیں ہے. اور ابابیل کے بارے میں لوگ سمجھتے ہیں کہ جیسے یہ کوئی پرندے ہیں، سوالوز نہیں ہے. نہیں، ابابیل عربی زبان میں کہتے ہیں جھنڈ کے جھنڈ کو، یعنی ڈار نہیں آپ جسے کہتے ہیں کلیکٹیو ایک ناؤن ہے. اس کا مطلب ہے بہت سارے پرندے، اور یہ وہی جنگلی پرندے تھے جو کہ گوشت خور پرندے ہوتے ہیں. تو یہ جیسے میں نے کہا کہ آپ اس کی تفصیل دیکھ سکتی ہیں in these two references for more details.
Thank you, Dr. Shehzad. There's a question in the chat. At 70, I have invested in Behbood saving. I get profit. How should I view it?
I think at your age and the circumstances that you might be passing through, this is the only option that you might have if you're living in a country like Pakistan. Yes, it is interest earned, but then, as I said, that this is a exceptional circumstance, it's an exceptional situation, and hopefully God will forgive you for that.
Thank you. Rafia, you may briefly ask your question.
Dr. Shehzad, coming back to the same thing. So if I have loaned somebody 1 lakh and when he returns it to me, can I ask him then just give me the portion of the inflation, exact percentage, not 1 penny more? So if the inflation today is 14%, just give me 14% more. Will that be okay?
This should be done at the time of lending money. I mean, not at the time that he's going to return money to you. So that at the very time that you are lending money, it should become evident to the person that he is borrowing borrowing an amount for which he is liable to pay back with inflation. So it should not be a post return scenario. Right at the time that you're lending, the agreement should be made in this way that you tell that person that I'll be adjusting inflation.
Yes, that I would do. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Shehzad. Thank you, all of you, for participating. We will be concluding our session here today. And thank you all for joining. See you all tomorrow. Have a great rest of the day. Allah Hafiz.